What's up, students? I'm so excited because the past few weeks we've been talking about love. And love is this word that gets thrown around all the time. But really, I don't know if anybody knows what it looks like. So we spent the last few weeks showing what love looks like. Shameless plug, we do have a song on Spotify called What Love Looks Like. And you should give it a listen. But the first week we talked about how God shows his love for us. And it was powerful and exciting that we don't have to earn it or work towards it. He just loves us. And then last week we talked about what it looks like to love your boo thing, right? To love your significant other. What does that mean? How can you do it? What if you're not dating? So if you haven't already watched those, you can go back and kind of learn what love looks like from the last 2 weeks. But today, I get to talk about what it looks like to love your friends. And friends are kind of the most important relationships that we have right now. Friends make us stronger. Pastor Todd always says, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. The people around us shape who we are. And here's the truth. Some of you have been operating thinking, I don't really need friends. I don't need people. The people in my life don't really matter. And you kind of isolate. But can I tell you, you were created for community. You were created to be with people. You weren't meant to do life alone. But some of us get so used to being alone, we're too scared of what it looks like to ask somebody to come along. So today, we're talking about friends. Knowing that community holds that much of a weight in our life, we kind of need to know what it looks like to get good friends and maintain good friends and what it looks like to be a good friend. Friendships matter. And so tonight, here's what we're talking about. What does it look like to be a good friend? And we're going to be focusing in on the story of David and Jonathan. And these dudes, real homies. They were best friends, but not just when things were easy. They were best friends when things were hard and difficult and confusing. And so we're going to look at their life, look at their friendship to see what it looks like to be a good friend. And here's the truth. If you are going to be a good friend, you need to learn what it looks like to show up. You want a friend who will show up for you when it matters. And so there's a few ways that we can show up. The first is that we show up consistently. That word consistently can be defined as acting or behaving the same way. I don't know about you, but that's the kind of friend I want. I don't want somebody who's wishy-washy, who likes me one day and doesn't like me the next day, who'll be my best friend and then won't text me back. That's not the kind of friend I want, and that's not the kind of friend I want to be. Friendships matter. And so if you're going to be a good friend, you're going to learn what it looks like to show up consistently. And I think when we hear that word consistency, we get a little bit nervous, right? What does it mean to be their friend at all moments? Here's the deal. Consistency can't be based off of convenience. Sometimes we're consistent when it's easy, when your friend is being really nice and their life is really great and you have no homework that week. You could be consistent, but consistency can't be based off of how convenient it is for your life. That's not what friendship is. And I think the other layer that we have when it comes to consistency is we think consistency should be based off of a condition. We think, okay, I'll be consistent only if they do this thing for me. I'll be consistent only if they're consistent for me, only if they earn it, only if they show up, only if they text me back. And we put a condition on friendship. And my fear is that some of you won't ever be consistent in your friendships because you put conditions on people that you never tell them. You put an expectation on them that you've never told them before. And so you find yourself getting hurt and bitter and resentful and walking away from the very friendship that God has for you. See, the truth is, friends show up consistently, whether it's easy, whether it's hard, when it's sunny or when it's raining. If you're a friend, you're going to show up. So I told you we're going to be talking about the two friends, David and Jonathan. We're going to look at their story. And listen, I know some of you guys are like, Joy, I don't even know who those people are. And some of you might say, I don't really know what to do when I read the Bible. I think the Bible is boring. Let me tell you, this story is going to change your mind. The Bible is not boring. Let me tell you, this is like a Netflix episode, these guys' life. So let me give you some background on David and Jonathan. I told you, these guys were friends. But Jonathan, his dad was Saul. Saul was the king of Israel. But let me tell you, Saul had some issues. He had some mistakes that he made that didn't honor God. And so because of this, Saul is the king now, but David is who God planned to be king next. David is Jonathan's friend. And you might be thinking, okay, Joy, so what? This mattered so much because Jonathan was next in line to be king. If Saul honored God, if Saul walked forward in what his purpose really was, if he didn't dishonor who God was or dishonor God's plan for the people of Israel, the next person in line to be king should have been Jonathan. But because of Saul's actions, Jonathan was no longer in line. It was David. And that made Saul angry. Saul was upset that God would take away the kingship from his family. Saul knew he messed up, but he didn't think a consequence was necessary. So he set forward on this crazy mission to kill David. He did whatever it took. And so here we are, these two best friends, Jonathan and David. Jonathan's dad is trying to kill David. You can see where that's maybe a hard moment to be a friend, how it could be a little bit inconvenient to be a friend when your dad is literally trying to kill him. It's crazy. And so fast forward in the story, David goes to his friend Jonathan, scared, and tries to tell him, dude, your dad is trying to kill me. I don't know what I did. If I messed up, can you let me know what is happening? And Jonathan was taken back. He was confused. He didn't know that this was happening. And David, in fear and wondering what was going to happen next, he says this in 1 Samuel 20. He says, show me the loyalty as my sworn friend, for we made a solemn pact before the Lord, or kill me yourself if I've sinned against your father. But please don't betray me to him. Never, Jonathan exclaimed. You know that if I had the slightest notion my father was planning to kill you, I would tell you at once. And here's what that means. David is pleading and saying, dude, I'm sorry. If I did something wrong, I'm sorry, but please, as my friend, stop this. As my friend, tell me if something bad is going to happen. And Jonathan, as his friend, says, if I knew, I would stop it. If I knew, I would tell you because you are my friend, and I promise. That is consistency where there's a challenge. It would have been so easy for Jonathan to give up and be on his dad's side. It would have been so easy for Jonathan to say, actually, I'm supposed to be king. You're taking away my purpose. It would have been easy. But that's not what Jonathan did. Because Jonathan was a good friend. And he saw that his friend was in trouble. And though it might have been hard for him, though it might have hurt, though it might have caused some tension between him and his family, he knew as a friend, he was going to show up. As a friend, he was going to be consistent. And you might be sitting here thinking, Joy, I'm not trying to be king. My family does not want to kill anybody. I'm just a kid. You're right. So what does this look like in your life? To show up consistently for your friend might mean going and sitting with that kid who everybody is talking about. And instead of joining the crew of gossip, you're going to go and sit and be a friend, even if it might not make you look good, even if people might be looking at you. If you are going to be a good friend, you're going to be a good friend when they're popular or when they're not. You're going to be a good friend when you're mad or when you're happy. You're going to show up consistently because friendship isn't based off of your feelings. Friendship is a choice. You're going to choose to show up and be consistent. And I told you, we're going to look at these guys and we're going to see a few ways that they're consistent, a couple ways that they show up. So they show up consistently, but they show up spiritually too. I think this is the part where we lose in friendships. We think that our church friends and our house friends are different people. Our church friends, our school friends, the friends that we see on the weekend, these are all different people. And I can talk about church and Jesus with my church friends because they get it, right? I can worship for real with my church friends because they totally know what's going on. They won't look at me weird. They won't think it's weird. I can pray for my church friends because they know how to pray too. But then you go to school and your school friends don't see that side of you. Your school friends, you won't even bring up that you love Jesus. Your school friends, you won't pray for. You won't worship. You'll change your Spotify playlist to something else because those are your school friends. And your school friends and your church friends can't intersect. But being a friend means you're going to show up spiritually, even if spiritually it's not easy. Meaning, you're going to show up and you're going to tell your friends about Jesus, even if it's not at church. and you're going to show up and you're going to pray for your friends when it's hard, even if it's not at church. And I love that you're here, and I love that you're watching, and I love that you're learning this. But if it stays here, if it stays at church, or it stays right there in your room and you don't know what it looks like to go out in the world and love people and love your friends, I let you down. And I'm not in the business of letting people down. So let me tell you, you are going to learn what it looks like to show up spiritually, because that's what friends do. It's not based off of when it's easy to care or love or pray for somebody. It's based off of the friend who's going to show up and care even in the hard moments. See, I told you, David and Jonathan, they had it hard. David was running for his life, and we pick up the story here in 1 Samuel 23. It says, one day near Horish, David received the news that Saul was on the way to Ziph to search for and kill him. Jonathan went to find him and encouraged him to stay strong in his faith in God. Don't be afraid, Jonathan reassured him. My father will never find you. You're going to be king of Israel, and I will be next to you, as my father Saul is well aware. So the two of them renewed their solemn pact before the Lord. Then Jonathan returned home. And here's what this is saying. David is hiding. His faith is dwindling. He doesn't know if he's going to make it. He has this call on his life to be king of Israel. But it seems like everything's going against him. God gave him this call, and suddenly the thing that he thought was exciting is the thing that's challenging him. His purpose is harder than he thought it was going to be, and it's hard for him to see where God is because everything feels like it's falling apart. Have you ever been there? Where you feel like everything is falling apart? Where you don't know what to do next? Your family feels a little broken right now. Your friends feel like they're leaving you and you don't know what to do next, and it's hard to have faith because you know God is real, but maybe you're in a season where it's hard to see that. It's hard to know that and to feel that God is with you. Well, my hope and my prayer is that if you're in that season, you have a friend like Jonathan. Or if you have a friend who's in that season, you can be a friend like Jonathan. Because let's go back to what he says. He says, don't be afraid. My father will never find you. You are going to be king of Israel, and I will be next to you. Here's why that matters. He said, don't be afraid. Why? Because the Lord is with you. He reaffirms David on his call and says, you will be the next king of Israel. He re-speaks over his life this thing that God spoke into him, because in that moment, it was hard for David to see it. He reaffirmed the call on his life by God, and he says, I will be with you, even though my father is against you. And my father knows. This is what Jonathan's saying. I will be there for you spiritually. I will show up and remind you who God has called you to be. And I will stand with you until you believe it yourself. Even if it's inconvenient, even if it's scary, I will be with you. I don't know about you, but I want friends like that. I want friends who will stand with me and believe for me when I can't believe. I have some of the best friends I know. I have some of the best friends, and I know that feels like a flex, but it's not because they just randomly walked into my life. It's because I've worked hard to be a good friend, to keep good friends. And when I think about friendship, I think of my friend Erica. She is one of the most encouraging people I know. She makes it a habit to repeat and speak over my life the things that I feel like God has called me to. She prays for me and cares for me and points me back to Jesus when I don't know what I'm doing. And that's the kind of friend that I need. And so my challenge for you when you hear this, you might feel pressured. Like, Joy, I don't have a friend like that. Where can I get a friend like that? Well, it starts with being a friend like that. If you want people in your life who are going to encourage you and point you back to Jesus, my hope is that you are a person who is encouraging and points people back to Jesus. And when we do this, it allows us to be the kind of friends that show up consistently and show up spiritually. We're not going to keep our friendship and our love of God and our power of prayer here at the church. It's supposed to be outside of the church. We're supposed to be loving people inside the church and outside of the church. So your friends at school who you've kept in this bubble, my challenge is that you figure out what it looks like to show up spiritually for those friends too. And the last way that you're going to show up is you're going to show up boldly. I want you in the chat right now, capital letters, boldly, where you're going to learn what it looks like to show up boldly. Here's what that means. It's knowing when you show up that sometimes you're going to have to step up. You're not showing up and sitting on the sidelines and hoping that things work out for your friends. No, there are some times where God needs you to step up and care for your friend. We pick up this story in 1 Samuel 20. It says this: Saul boiled with rage at Jonathan, and he swore at him. Do you think I don't know that you want David to be king in your place, shaming yourself and your mother? Let me pause there. Saul, obviously angry. He's angry that his son is choosing to be a friend in this moment. And he's reminding his son, what you're doing is totally countercultural. You fighting for your friend David to be king is countercultural. The world doesn't do it that way. You should be fighting for yourself. It's every man for yourself. That's not what Jonathan did. And that's not what being a friend is. Nobody wants to be friends with somebody who always chooses them. You want to be friends with people who care for others. And so we pick up the story, and it says this: as long as that son of Jesse is alive, you will never be king. Now go and get him so I can kill him. So Jonathan asks, but why should he be put to death? What has he done? And Saul hurled his spear at Jonathan, intending to kill him. So at last, Jonathan realized that his father was really determined to kill David. Saul was so obsessed with himself, so obsessed with keeping and protecting his title and his popularity and his blessing, that he forgot what it looked like to love other people, including his son. Because his son wasn't on the same mission as him, he didn't want him anymore. He literally tried to kill him. But Jonathan, in that moment, said, Dad, why does he deserve to die? Dad, don't you see what you're doing? This is a person. Don't you see that this is my friend? And Jonathan knew the minute he stepped into that conversation, it wasn't going to be easy. But he knew he needed to step up and fight for his friend, because in that moment, his friend couldn't fight for himself. He showed up boldly, and that boldness almost got him killed. And so I don't think you're going to go into school and someone's going to throw a spear at you or a spear at your friends. And if so, we got to talk offsite, because that's crazy. But I do think there are times when your friend's not in the room and you need to fight for your friend, where you hear people maybe spreading rumors or lies about your friend, and you sit back and you hold it, and you know it's not true, but you don't want to interrupt. You know it's not true, but you don't want them to say anything about you. And so you step back when you were supposed to step up for your friend. So at school, the next time that happens, your mission is to step up and be bold for your friend, because your friend's not in the room. And it might make you look weird, and it might not make you popular, but it will allow you to show up in the way that they needed before they ever knew they needed it. So that might not be it. You might be like, Joy, I'm homeschooled. That's why I'm watching online. That's cool. How can you show up boldly for your friend? You step up and you call them up to what God has for them. Sometimes you guys allow friendships to do whatever they want. You let your friend do whatever they want, and you know it's a bad idea, and you know that they shouldn't have said yes, or they shouldn't have texted that guy. You knew that this wasn't what God has for them, but you're too scared to say anything. A good friend calls up and reminds them what God has for them. So I don't know how you need to show up boldly, but I know that if you leave this message and you don't, you're missing out on what a true friendship looks like. Friendship is someone who shows up consistently, someone who shows up spiritually, and someone who's willing to show up boldly. Friends, community is important. The people we have in our lives are important. And too many times we just let people in and out, and we don't fight for it, and we don't care for it, and we don't pray for it. And we think everybody can be my friend. Everybody can speak into my life. But the right friends will lead you in the right direction. And my prayer is that you can be that right friend too. So your bottom line for tonight is that we must show up to show love to our friends. So I'm going to pray for you that we can be people who are willing to show up. God, thank you so much for showing up for us. When we learn about friendship, really we're learning about what it looks like to love and care for people the way that you do. And so my prayer is for everybody on the other side of the screen, God. My prayer is that we would learn what it looks like to show up consistently and consistently care for the people around us, to show up spiritually and not be scared to pray for and speak truth over our friends, and that we would show up boldly, that we wouldn't miss the moments that you've called us to step up, and that we'd walk forward in truth, but also in grace. And so we love you, and we're thankful that you are our very first, very consistent friend. And I pray, Lord, for the student on the other side of the screen who feels like they don't have any friends. God, I pray that they would find genuine community of people who do these things, for people who show up and care for them, God. So we love you and we praise you. It's in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen. Can't wait to see you guys in groups in a little bit.